Good morning, everyone. It's gone 11 o'clock. So very warm welcome to our briefing. We've got a couple of items on our agenda, housing strategy and a presentation from Kāinga Ora. And I've got an apology from Councillor Martin, who's unable to attend our briefing today. I'm hoping that others will be joining us. I can't yet see Councillor Golightly or Cutforth or Reid. Oh yes, I can see Simon. I beg your pardon. And a reminder that our briefing is being recorded today. I'm also hoping that Ramari there's Jane, excellent, is in the list of staff members who are present because she will be leading the briefing and is going to go through the strategy discussion. So I'm keen for her to give us the outline of what we're going to be talking about and lead that whole process, and then we'll be there she is. Then we'll be looking for discussion with the councillors after Ramari has been right through her presentation, and then we'll be moving into the Kāinga Ora presentation as well. So is that clear, everybody? Thumbs ups. Excellent. So over to you, Ramari. Well, and lovely to see you on our screens. And you're on mute.
Apologies. Kia ora, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to introduce both elements this morning. I wanted to talk to you about the two parts of the housing workshop that we have this morning. We have firstly, which Inju, Tony and Hamish will take you through, which is the overview of the housing challenges, where we'll be seeking feedback from you around the different options we have to seek feedback so that we can initiate the housing strategy. And this is really for us looking at the housing strategy and affordable housing for the Whangarei region. The second part is we have Kāinga Ora joining us, and we have Jeff Murray, who's the Regional Director for the Northern Region. And this is where we're going to be talking about social housing. Kāinga Ora expressed an interest to return to elected members. They wanted to seek further feedback on a large-scale development in the of social housing in the Vinery Lane car park. So they're going to join us in the later part of this session and go through and in a bit more focused detail about what type of feedback that they'll be seeking from you. So if we can start with the housing strategy, and I'll introduce Inju and Hamish, and of course Tony is there for questions as well.
Kia ora koutou. Can everybody hear me all good? Awesome. Hope you guys are doing well. I know it's a pretty difficult time at the moment, but let's just make the best of a bad situation, eh? Before we kick off today, I think it's important to give a bit of context for why we're here. In the last LTP, from what we heard from the public, housing is a key issue which council should be more devoted to. So in response to that feedback, council put aside $150,000 to develop this new housing strategy. And since that decision had been made, at a staff level, we've been working together to understand what is it that we're looking to achieve in this space, and to better understand what are the options moving forward with this strategy. And when we do get into discussion around how we should be approaching this housing strategy, we need to consider a wide range of things because, as we all know, housing is a multifaceted issue. And could you move to the next slide? Oh, thank you. Okay, so the way that this is going to be broken down into, we've broken it down into three sections. Try and get through it as quick as we can. So firstly, I'm going to give you a bit of a high-level overview of the key housing issues and other market considerations in the Whangarei district. And then I'm going to be providing a bit of an overview for how council currently responds to housing. And then I'm going to pass it over to Inju, who's going to walk you through the 5 options in which we're bringing forward to you today. There'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions on what we're bringing forward to you today, and we'll answer those to the best of our ability. Yep. Thank you. So what you see here on the screen is a bit of an indication for how the housing strategy fits across council. On the right hand side of the diagram, it gives a bit of an overview for how council currently responds to housing, whether that's through our infrastructure strategy or our district plan or our growth strategy, for example. And if you can also see that there's an arrow from the growth strategy pointing down to the housing strategy. And what that's indicating is that the growth strategy identified the development of this housing strategy as a key component to better understand council's long-term response to housing. And then finally, if you see on the left-hand side, where you can see central government policy through the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, that just shows how at a policy level that filters down into council's strategies and planning roles. And if that doesn't make sense, I'm happy to go back over that with you if needed. Yeah, thank you. So what you see on the screen here is a bit of a summary for how council currently is involved in the housing space. I won't go into too much detail on this because it's on the agenda, but historically, council's role has predominantly been focused in 2 areas. Firstly, our land use planning, which is driven by our district plan, and secondly, through the investment into infrastructure, which is driven by where and when we're expecting our population to grow. But what you see on the bottom half of that diagram, on the enable and support, is actually council's role in the housing space is growing, whether that's through our inner city work program that's looking around the economic feasibility for apartment and townhouses in our city centre, or whether it's working at an agency level through Whaikainga to better understand how we can accelerate new housing development in Whangarei and across Tai Tokerau. Yep. Cool. Thank you. On your screen, you should see 3 key issues with housing across the district. And all 3 of these issues are having real impacts on the livelihoods of many across the district. So, for example, if we look at housing affordability, and from a statistics point of view, since 2010, housing sale prices have actually gone up by around 67%. And while rental prices, I believe, have gone up 44% at the same time. This level of unaffordability across our housing market is impacting all areas of the market, whether you're a young working professional like myself, whether you're a young family looking to purchase your first home, or whether you're on the other side of the demographic and you're nearing that retirement. It's impacting all levels of that market. And then if we look at housing quality, historically, Whangarei has had a poor housing stock, largely through, particularly noticeable through mould and dampness. And as we know, this leads to a series of other health issues. And then finally, the third key issue is around that housing choice. And this is where council, out of the three, has the most ability to influence the direction of the market. And as we know from our available data, our housing stock is largely around that standalone dwelling, with very few apartments and townhouses being built, even if this is being enabled through our district plan. And then when you consider things that, for example, if our average household size is around that 2.5 people, it's about better understanding what are the other market influences that are contributing to the way that we are developing. Yep. Thank you. So when we're thinking about how we want to proceed with this housing strategy, there's a whole heap of things that we need to take into consideration. And simply some of these things are out of our jurisdiction. For example, we know that Whangarei has an aging population. The amount of people who are in that 65 plus age bracket is significantly higher than the national average. We also know that Whangarei has a lower household income comparing to, again, a national average. So what sort of opportunities are available when households aren't necessarily on that same playing field when it comes to income? And also we know that we've got a significantly higher Māori population, again, comparing to a national average. So what sort of opportunities are there that we can maximise on moving into the medium and long term? And like I say, these things are out of council's jurisdiction to influence, but it's really important that we make note of these. Yep. Next one. Thank you. I'm not going to go into any real detail on the slide, but I think it's just important to be aware of what's coming from a central government point of view. We know that housing is of a priority for central government. This is being driven largely through legislation reforms through the RMA, significant investment into Kāinga Ora, and also other opportunities such as upskilling our labour market. Last slide. Thank you. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because we've got another presentation coming up. But we know that the role of Kāinga Ora in Whangarei is only going to grow. So from a council perspective, it's about understanding how we can help support what they're doing to ensuring that we're achieving the best possible outcomes for our community. Yeah. So I'm going to hand it over to Inju now, who's going to run you through the 5 options in which we'll be presenting to you on for the strategy.
Thanks, Hamish. Morena koutou. Nice to see you all. I'll take you through just a quick overview of what council staff has prepared as housing options to further progress the housing strategy. As we all know, the housing is a complex and multifaceted issue, but really understanding the local housing journey for Whangarei, what that means for us is really imperative. So staff have been brainstorming a little bit, and we've identified 5 different options or pathways, opportunities into progressing this housing strategy, which we'd like to present now and get your feedback on, I guess. But what is really imperative is that working on this alone is not possible, and that a collaborative approach is required. So the first option that I'd like to introduce is the housing needs assessment. It's kind of a snapshot into really understanding what are our local housing needs and get a deeper understanding of what they are, whether that's a population based for Whangarei or some kind of needs-based cohorts, whether that's an age-specific thing or needs, for example, needs for our disability or other geographical or cultural communities. And what the benefits of this approach would be to kind of give a more of a qualitative understanding of what that housing need is. It could then provide direction and evidence as to where future investment for council, government agencies or the private sector and community will respond to that need. And then this would also be able to inform our other council forward planning initiatives and programs of work. And one of the examples that was given was the Palmerston North, which is a little bit outdated. I think it's in 2011 that they produced that report, but that kind of identified from their perspective the emerging issues that they then could respond to investing in that community and social housing space. The next approach I'd like to introduce is also a focused approach, kind of understanding that pensioner and senior housing space. So this option would be to develop a strategy to assess and identify those opportunities that we have on our council-owned land to intensify and reconfigure units to increasing that yield. And what some of the, and as Hamish mentioned, we know that we have ageing population, approximately 19.6% is 65 and over, and there are a number of people waiting to enter our pensioner units. And what some of those benefits could include would be to increase our stock as there is increasing demand for our housing, and that approach is also supported by a positive ageing advisory group. Council has a track record of working in this space that we can further build on, and Council also through the long-term plan process allocated money that this strategy could inform how we spend that money in a pragmatic and holistic way. The third option would be to work alongside our government agencies and private sectors that are currently in the Whaikainga working group space. So the option would basically be to somehow resource and support that working group that currently exists. And one of the significant benefits would also be to hopefully influence what some of those housing outcomes could be for us in Whangarei. And build stronger relationships with those government agencies. The fourth approach is to develop a council-led strategy, and this would also be in partnership with our community, the private sector, Māori hapu, and also government agencies. So it still is quite collaborative in its intent, but it would be, I guess, identifying specific areas of focus or work streams that we could then undertake, whether it's the Māori space, unlocking Papakainga opportunities, our pensioner housing space, affordable housing, etc. And there are different approaches in doing that, but some of the benefits is that we could create that really strategic housing framework and sets a strategic direction for housing in Whangarei. And it will be able to link to our council's outcomes and goals through the long-term plan, and we could demonstrate how we can intend to achieve these goals through those action plans and tagging different agencies. The final approach we wanted to introduce was also a community-led strategy. So that would be to develop a community-led strategy as well as working alongside those previous partners, community, hapu, the CHIPS, community housing providers, as well as government agencies, more of a grassroots sort of ground up approach to develop what that housing strategy would be. Some of those benefits could be harnessing already what's in the community and tapping into those local understandings, skills, skills and knowledge, build and develop and foster stronger working relationships with our community. It could kind of tap into other spaces that council isn't usually working in, and therefore explore more diverse range of housing options, and therefore reduce our risk because it also has community-driven actions and costs to council when undertaking further housing. And there's also been strong central government direction and policy with regards to, I think earlier in the month, there has been, the Minister, Megan Woods, has indicated that funding is also becoming available for CHIPS to access new funding streams to deliver housing and faster. And one of the case studies that we could kind of draw from is the Horowhenua. It's a community-driven housing action plan. So that was kind of like a really fast, quick overview of some of the different approaches, acknowledging that they're all quite interconnected in some respects and that there are overlaps. But we kind of just wanted to have and initiate a discussion with you to kind of get the ball rolling. And some of the discussion points that we kind of came up with for this particular briefing was, what are the key drivers that are developing our housing strategy? If you would like to provide some feedback into the different housing strategy approaches or options, and really to identify who are the key people that we need to be talking to when developing this strategy. I'm not sure who's going to facilitate, but
thank you to both you and Hamish and you for that. Ramari, have you got anything you want to add before I sort of open it up to the elected members just for their feedback?
Yes, thank you. Just to summarise, there is a lot in this presentation, we do know that, but this is the beginning, and as Hamish and Inju have outlined, this is the journey we need to take, and your feedback is important to that journey. So we do welcome this, understanding that that slide, Inju, can you go back to that slide where it has the housing affordability, housing, yeah, can we just sit on that slide? The housing affordability, housing, with the $, that housing.
Fourth slide.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. If we could use
the high level housing issues?
No, the sorry, the one with the housing affordability, housing quality, and housing options.
Housing options. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it was the fourth slide. No, the fifth slide. Sorry.
Fifth slide. Yeah. If we could use the fifth slide as a guide for feedback, that would be really useful. Thank you in advance for your feedback.
Thanks, Ramari. So the from what I'm taking, as you say, this is a really big area of work, and we'll have lots of different responses from our elected members. But just also focusing on the strategy options, there were the 5, whether we go down the housing needs assessment, or focusing on pensioner senior housing, or social and affordable housing, a council-led strategy, or community-led strategy. Hopefully everybody sort of got that list of 5 options. So I'd be quite keen also if you can incorporate in your feedback to the team which of those 5 you would believe that we need to focus on given our specific needs. And I acknowledge the work that in the report around the huge amount of data that we've already gathered. So we're in a really good position to be able to just look to the future. And I quite liked that Horowhenua statement, Homes for All, if that's kind of what our goal is, that would be good to focus on. Now I'm going to try and look for hands raised. Vince, you're up first.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Hamish and Inju, good presentation. I just would like to talk to you about slide 6, because I just want to know where you got your figures for the Kaipara prices. I know we're talking about Whangarei, but the Kaipara prices are rather high. And as a wife who works in real estate, she tells me that these aren't realistic for Kaipara. These are probably realistic for Mangawhai, but not Kaipara as a whole.
I definitely take your point, and this again it comes down to a median. So obviously, Mangawhai would have a large bearing on the median house price that you see for Kaipara, but also it gives a bit of an indication moving forward as well. If again looking at the way in which population is anticipated to grow out at Mangawhai, but I definitely take your point.
Yeah, because just to highlight, Dargaville is quite a lot less than that, along with Ruruai, Te Kauparu, and all the other areas which are part of Kaipara. And also, when it comes to Whangarei, you've included there the median house price of $747. This seems to be rather low from what I'm picking up. And the graph that you've got across the far left-hand side there, showing that an existing property is $465. This is now $600. And talking to any real estate agents within Whangarei, they're saying that $600 is now the lower quartile price for an existing house.
I think this data is also from earlier in the year, so just to note that it's a little bit more indicative and not actual. But yeah, I think the market is shifting significantly, and that's important to create a picture of what's kind of happening. Also, we get updated information for sure.
Greg Innes.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I take a level of comfort from the fact that under our regulation, we have sufficient land zoned for housing under that national policy statement, and I feel that council's role to give feedback at that more general level that you're asking for, we've got to concentrate on where we can influence, and it seems to me that we need to be as proactive as possible. And when we look at other local government organisations within New Zealand, those that have been reasonably proactive, such as Hastings, has been able to get considerable funding from other stakeholding interests. So coming back to those 5 options that you put forward, I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I saw that the needs assessment, if we've got a lot of data there, then it would be reasonably straightforward to pull something together there. You did mention a qualitative component to supplement the quantitative information, and I think that's important, but it should be part of, I would think, a community-led strategy where you're actually involved and targeting communities, and then starting to look at how we can go forward given the information we've got, and a full range of interests within that. I feel that central government, along with other agencies, private sector, will also be important. So, and then it comes down to action points, and at that stage, hopefully, the ownership of those who are participating in the exercise can support the community in those needs assessment. Thank you.
Ken.
Thank you. I agree a lot with that. I follow on from Greg and agree with a lot of what he said. We were lucky enough to go to that housing show that was put on by Kaingaora down in Auckland, and had the meeting the following day. We saw some of their houses and what they're doing. I do agree that at the meeting, one of the main themes to come out was that we all need to work in our areas, as Greg has said, know what our area is, be clear about it, and then work with the other agencies out there. So I'm leaning towards a community-led basis that was put up, so that effectively we do get the result that we're looking for, rather than just trying to reinvent the wheel. So thank you. I'm keen on anything that sends us in that direction, and if it's been done successfully by a council, and the Hastings Council comes up time and time again, then I'm very keen that we go and learn from them rather than start all over again. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. I don't see any other hands. Oh yeah, Carol.
I agree with Greg that a community-led plan also includes a degree of needs assessment, and the other advantage of it is that it pulls in the energy of the local government, of the central government, who I have to say, in the presentation that we went to down in Auckland, one of the things that the workers kept talking about is how much energy they'd put into collaboration with the local communities. So involving the local communities in this is a game changer. And I also heard in the presentation from Hamish that this is an area we tend not to do a lot of. We go out and consult in a consulting way, but running a couple of collaborative think tanks would really enhance our knowledge of this, of where to go, and also the energies of developers, the energies of central government, and the energies of people that are looking for homes. And I'm not just talking about homeless people, but people that can't afford to get in housing. And that's quite clear, because those people are the homeless of the future. If you fast forward another 30, 40 years and they haven't managed to buy their houses, so they also are the future. So I also like the Horowhenua quote, "Homes for all."
Thanks, Carol. Anna?
I was just typing another message saying I agree with Carol. I think the key is to collaborate with community over this. So if council can facilitate that kind of collaborative model, there are all these groups who are working in this space. Let's can bring in what they know and work together to come up with something really good. But I also think we do pensioner housing really well. And when you look at our policy, I wrote in a message earlier, the great thing about our pensioner housing is that it's affordable for people, and there is a waiting list. And the approach has to be overarching. Pensioner housing is just something that flows out of that further down in the assessment. So I agree with Carol. The way to look at it from the top is a collaborative approach. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Ken, I see your, and then Tricia.
Thank you. I just forgot to say, and I would like to add that with that Home Acceleration Fund of 3.8 billion, there is a real opportunity for us as a council to improve our infrastructure and really look ahead. And it's obviously a great time when the political will is out there for us to be really on top of our game. And I think we should be cognizant of that too. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Tricia?
Well, I think it can be many-pronged, but in particular, I think given that the call during the long-term plan consultation was from the community for a housing strategy, I think it's really important that it is a community housing strategy and community-led, with council being a partner. I know, just looking at Taitokoro Emergency Housing Trust that I'm the council rep on, I'm sure that they would be really keen to have some sort of lead involvement in it, I guess, as people who are sort of have some expertise in that area, which is not something that we have on a ground, on a ground level, if you like. But equally, I don't think that I think we can go ahead with the senior housing, pensioner housing, without actually needing to wait for a strategy. I think we all know that we need more, that we've got funding in the LTP for that. And I think that can happen alongside a community-led housing strategy. So the two things, really. Thank you.
Thanks, Tricia. Vince?
Oh, sorry, Your Worship. I noticed Nicholas had his hand up for quite a bit, but just want to highlight it, is that if we do go out to the community, please can we make sure that the Chamber of Commerce and other businesses out there are actually involved in it, because they've been working with the council, or trying to work with council, for a long time in relation to property development and getting accommodation within the CBD, as an example. And they have this very distinct views as well. So not just getting the views from the community, but also from the business people who are actually working with council.
Thanks, Vince. Nick?
Thank you. Yeah. As one of the most recent into the housing market, it's amazing the amount of money that's been going in, and the pricing affordability has just been going crazy, even for myself and my partner, who are reasonably well off, trying to actually find somewhere. It has been a struggle actually trying to get in. So the housing choice for different people is definitely one of those options that we need to be able to allow people that do want a smaller abode to be able to live in that type of a space, whether it be a papakai type of spaces or an apartment or some other way of or shape or form, because if everybody has to be stuck into these copy paste of the Kiwi dream living kind of thing, the stock standard, there's only so much room we can actually do before urban sprawl as well happens. With all those, with the 5 options as well, we need to be able to be doing a little bit of each, really. Hearing the benefits of the community-led strategy is definitely kind of picked up on my radar, but making sure that all the other areas get kind of picked up. And I mean, social and affordable housing and pensioner housing would probably come into it as well within those type of spaces. But yeah, I agree with Tricia on the space that we can do more in the pensioner housing. But at the same time, where we can go with these type of things is, well, it's up to us, really.
Thanks, Nicholas. Any other comments? Kevin?
Yeah, so I'm just removing my hand. So this is the same conversation we had 2 years ago. And they talked about needs assessments, doing a needs assessment and all that. We don't need a needs assessment. It's not like we're going to build too many pensioner housings by mistake. Everybody knows that there is a real need for all those sorts of housing that you brought up before. We all know there's a real demand for that. Our role is to how do we accelerate that, and this is the so we don't need to do a needs assessment. There's a heap of groups who've done that. We know there's 200 homeless people out there. We could go through that all again and interview them all and go through all the different community groups that have got these numbers, and at the end of it we'll come out with there's 200 homeless people. We need to develop something for them. But so that to me is an absolute waste of time. We've had all the all this collaboration and all that. It's all happened before. We've done all this to death. So how do we move forward? How do we go to that next stage? Which places like Hastings have done? Everybody said this is bureaucracy. Hastings bypassed that bureaucracy and this is what I understand they did. They formed a smaller, tighter group, including councillors and staff, working with outside agencies like MSD and all these other Kāinga Ora, and we've already developed the relationship with Jeff from Kāinga Ora, and it's just a matter of narrowing down what we can do and saying to him, we're here ready to go, not we're going to do a needs assessment, we'll get back to you in a few months. We really need to get into it now, and Jeff's here now. I think I saw him sign on earlier. So we need a smaller, tighter group, not the whole council sitting together going over this sort of stuff. We need 2 or 3 councillors, and we've got a couple of ready-made ones. There's Carol, who's just so passionate about it. We need her with maybe 1 or 2 others, meeting with these smaller groups with staff as well. Important to be working with staff because they know the on the ground stuff. So I just think it's time to move on with this all the talk and start doing something.
Thanks, Gavin. Any other feedback? I've got a few things to say as well. Any other councillors wanting to speak? My input is I agree. I think we've got plenty of data. The evidence in the wider community is that I see Phil. I'll come to you after this. Is that the affordability issue is the main criteria that I believe we should be focusing on. The question is, are we a leader or a partner? My inclination was to go with a council-led strategy, but looking at pulling in the partners, but perhaps the community-led model could be better. But I'm just would sort of take advice on that. But I personally think we should be focusing on the affordability. We're looking at the report that I think was Hamish authored around the release of land in Port Nico through Papakāinga and other options that we have, that should be the focus for us. And I know that there've been some applications through the Housing Acceleration Infrastructure Fund to provide private development with the infrastructure required to produce more homes. But I think if we are looking, we know where the gap in the market is. Yes, there's agree with focus on seniors housing because that the demographic is showing that's required, but it's also that the affordability, which I personally believe we should be focusing on. Phil.
Yeah, I just want to back up what Gavin just said. Yeah, we can talk all day and still won't get anywhere. But we've got to have a focus on it, and we've got to put some timelines. We're going to meet some deadlines, and otherwise this term's going to be completed before we finish anything. So I totally support what Gavin said. There's enough talent around our council chamber to really make a difference here, and we need to put some real urgency into it. Thank you.
Shelley, have you got anything you want to add?
No, not at this point. Basically, I think we should be, I agree with Trish, I think we should be concentrating on pensioner housing in particular. I think we need to be careful that we don't take over a government role. I think our ratepayers deserve better of us than that. I'm interested when we get to the Kāinga Ora presentation to find out exactly what council's role as a partner may be considered to be. That's it from me at the moment.
Thanks, Shelley. That's a really good segue to the next one. I'm just conscious that Simon, is there anything you wanted to add before we move into the Kāinga Ora presentation?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Gavin to a point. The need's been established, we know that, but as councillors, we must remember that it's not council's core responsibility to actually provide the housing. It's our job, along with staff input, to provide the vehicle to assist the likes of Kāinga Ora and whatever other agency might wish to hop on that vehicle. It is up to us to assist that through our specific abilities, not to actually go out and build this stuff. And that's something we've got to keep in the back of our mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. And Tricia, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question for you, Cheryl. When you say we should be focusing on affordability, what do you actually mean by that? What do you think we should be doing in that space? Thank you.
My thoughts are that if affordability is the problem, then we need to look and see how council, what part we have to play in the overall reduction of that problem. So it is a wider partnership, collaborative sort of model, but I'm sure there are some things that we can do in taking on Action Man Gavin's point around let's not keep talking about it, let's do something. I still do think that we need the professional advice and feedback as to what are the things that we can do, and that's where the strategy comes in. So that's where I think, I personally think the focus should be for the development of our strategy to be focusing on the areas that we do have influence and taking guidance from the team. I see Ramadi is back on screen. So Inju or Hamish or Ramadi, who's going to take over from here?
Kia ora. And can I just also, through the chair, add on to answering that question? Some of the ways in which we can influence affordability is through our urban design, through potential housing options. That's one of the ways in which it can influence. But through the strategy and through collaboration and partnership, we can explore opportunities of how that might impact. Thank you for all your feedback and input. That's been fantastic, and I'm sure our team will take all this on board, and at some point in the future we'll come back to you with our next steps. Sorry. If you have anything else, please drop it into the Teams chat and we'll pick it up from there. Now, if we can move on to the Kāinga Ora presentation while it's loading. Kāinga Ora, as I said earlier, they've expressed an interest to return to the elected members, again, to seek further feedback on a large-scale development of the Vinery Lane car park. Who's present? Jeff Murray, Regional Director of the Northern Region, is presenting along with Benjamin Pittman, Te Parafo, Sue Evans, Kāinga Ora Director, Urban Design, and Gary Looker, who will be assisting with any questions. Jeff, have you managed to get in?
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Ramari. Can I just check that you can hear me?
Yes.
All good. Yep.
All good. All right. Councillors, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to this proposal a second time. In this presentation, we're simply asking whether you would wish to work with us in partnership to develop some options to bring back to yourselves for further workshopping and discussion. If we can go to the second slide. I'm proposing that we go through this in 4 stages. To begin with, I'd like to ask Matua Benjamin Pittman to open and make some statements on behalf of Te Parafo, and then we'll come back to me and I'll outline the proposal to work in partnership and investigate some options for the site. And then we'll go to Sue Evans, our Director of Urban Design, to review the approach to quality design and some considerations for the site. And then we'd go to an open discussion with yourselves, if that's all right. Matua Benjamin, are you available to come on and speak? Okay, I'm not sure if he's there. I did see him join the meeting.
Can you hear me? Can I?
Sure. Over to you, Benjamin.
Tēnā tātou katoa. We're simply here as partners with Kāinga Ora. We are working on a relationship agreement formally with them as our Te Pau Whenua o Te Akiriri Kūkapa Trust. And so we've already had a number of very productive meetings. We've been and looked at sites with them. And really our interest is there for our people, certainly, as Jeff and others have pointed out, Māori have huge housing needs. And I know within my own immediate family that's true as well. But it's also about the wider community and this whole question, and I think many of you have focused on the issues. I totally agree with Cheryl about the affordability issue, and I also agree with everybody else, and particularly Gavin, that it's time to actually do something, and however that might best be done. So we're very pleased to be able to work productively with Kāinga Ora, and we think it's a great relationship for everybody. And of course, this is not to ignore the important role as a partner as well of council. So we're there to help in whatever way we can, and to be a productive partner in what is a very, very important area for our entire community. So really, that's all I'd like to say at the moment, and hand back to Jeff.
Tēnā koe mātua. So I'm now just going to go through some slides quite quickly, and then Sue will do hers. But I thought it might be useful to point out that from my own experience, I was raised on a farm. We raised our 3 children in the suburbs, and we have an apartment in central Auckland, which we've lived in for 5 years prior to moving up here, and now we're living in the suburbs in Whangarei. So I do have personal experience of living in apartments myself, and I found it to be great. But to today's discussion, Kāinga Ora would like to investigate the opportunity to develop 1 or 2 bedroom apartments on the council-owned car park at Waitangi Lane. We don't have any view at the moment on whether, what the design should be and what the typology should be. We would just like to work with you in partnership to work through the issues and come back with some good options. The intention is to agree a design brief with yourselves, prepare 2 or more development options, and workshop these with councillors to understand the strengths and challenges of each. And at that point to decide whether there's something there that we could proceed on. And if there is, then we would review a preferred design and seek some agreement in principle that the project could proceed, with further work on any agreement being subject to resource consent being achieved. Next slide, please. I've outlined here some potential objectives that we might work to for any design brief, which is just for consideration. And the first point there I've taken from the text of your appeals version of the district plan, because we support that and we want to honour and respect the quality approach that you're taking to developing the urban centre of Whangarei. And we would want our building, if it goes ahead, to be a positive contribution to that in terms of the architecture of the building, the street frontages. We would look at, as part of the design process, how we'd manage car parking, whether we could put on site a social service provider. Depending on the size of the site, we might have staff there during the day in an office ourselves. And we would be concerned about the quality of the landscaping and the way in which the building sat in the community. I won't go through the full list that we've listed there, but I would just say that we've got quite a lot of experience now of building apartments in existing communities and making them work. And one of the key things is to provide good staffing to support the tenants who live there. And we're in the process of employing quite a few additional staff so that we can move really from a focus on just being a landlord to continuing that and being a quality landlord, but also providing wraparound services to tenants so that we can support them to live well in the community and in the homes. In terms of, well, I'll get to that next. So perhaps we can go down to the next slide and some context. So on to the next slide. So just a quick recap. This process really began with an approach from Council CEO to say that in the context of the housing crisis, there were sites that he felt that we could look at, and so we did have a good look at those. The Binary Lane site stands out. It's well located to jobs and schools and services, well located in terms of transport networks, especially walking, cycling, bus and general transport. And I note from your growth strategy that those are things you're really interested in. And so I feel as though this site and the potential to develop it aligns really well with what you've done in your strategy and also in your district plan. And it is really suitable for apartment development in terms of the size of the site and the way that it could be integrated into the community. We have looked at other options as well, and we're still looking at other options. But one of the strengths of this site is that it's up on the hill and away from the difficult flatland in the urban centre. And at the previous presentation I made, there was a question about whether we would invest around the Hihiaua Peninsula. And we're not opposed to that, but I'm a little bit concerned that if we went in there first, it might make it more difficult for you to achieve your goals in terms of higher and middle income apartment living. So I don't know that we want to be first there. And in discussion with Council CEO, we raised the Binary Lane and Dent Street options as part of our wider introduction to Kaingaora last time I spoke. And now we're just wanting to advance in partnership at Binary Lane, if that's possible. So the next slide. You'll be familiar with these sorts of graphs. I won't dwell on here, but the demand for public housing is high and growing fast. And Whangarei is experiencing that more so than the other two districts in Northland. Could we go on to the next slide? Okay, so there's a need for 1 and 2 bedroom homes in Whangarei. The demand that we can reference from the MSD waitlist is very much for this type of living. The market's not supplying 1 and 2 bedrooms because it's just not commercially viable for them. So that's a demand that's not being met. And with an ageing population, there's a growing demand for this type of living. And also for us, we have a lot of single parent homes and small families. And so we're confident that we could meet a really strong demand by investing in this market. We go on to the next slide. So 67% of our customers are Māori, so that's a lot higher than the national average, which I think is around 38%. And 48% of our families are sole parents. So again, we could, especially in a 2-bedroom model, we could provide for small family groups. And that site has excellent access to schools. And also because people can do a lot of walking, they can access a lot of services without relying a lot on a car. And I know in my own experience, when we moved to our apartment, we went down to 1 car. And we would walk to almost everything, including shopping for our groceries. Next slide. So just briefly, here's a recap of the benefits of residential intensification, and this really mirrors your own work and your own kind of strategic position that's in your strategic documents about where you want to go. In terms of livability and the cost effectiveness of living this way, both in terms of providing the homes, but also in terms of the costs to people who are living in the homes. And then the social cohesion that can result from this if it's well managed. And I just make the point that we could select who moves into an apartment building by selecting out of our existing tenants. It's not going to be just a lucky dip. So we could see who would like to live in an apartment and who is living well and would live well in that sort of environment. Obviously, I couldn't give you a guarantee that there would be no issues amongst the tenants or from some of the tenants. But I just make the point that we've got 1,370 homes currently in the Whangarei district. And of those, we've got 65 where there is some type of issue on our books at the moment. And I would suggest that that's similar to the wider community, that our people are very similar. They're just mostly quietly going about their lives and living really well. And if we took a random selection of 1,300 homes from the Whangarei district, I feel as though we might get close to 65 that were having some difficulties that needed managing as well. So that's really where I want to hand over. If you go down to the next slide. I just wanted to make the point that this does is just how well located the site is in terms of a whole host of opportunities for people who would live there. And these opportunities are really hard to bring together. So, you know, a range of schools that would take children from primary through intermediate to high school, good access to jobs and services and public transport and walking and cycling. So it's really got it all in this location, and to work with you and look at options is really what we're asking to do at the moment. But I'll hand across now to Sue if she's there, and she will take you through some of the design and quality elements that we would bring.
Kia ora to everyone on the screen. My name's Sue Evans. I'm the Director of Urban Design, as it says on the cover. And I manage a national team that has got staff in Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland and Whangarei. It's quite a big team now, and that's reflective of Kāinga Ora's absolute commitment to doing a good job in development. If you have ever read the Kāinga Ora Act, which unusually makes very good reading for people like us, it talks about our job of delivering well-functioning urban environments and places, sustainable communities where people can thrive. And I guess in collaboration with all of our development partners within the business and councils, that's what we see our job as. So today I'm going to talk to you about our approach to quality urban design and architectural design. I'm going to show you some examples, and I'll focus a little bit more on Binary Lane, what the opportunities are. Could I go to the next slide? So this is a development that was completed, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago in Mangere. It's part of the Mangere master planned community. So we own a lot of asset in Mangere, and we've approached that asset in a master planning redevelopment manner where we have really engaged with the community and have a plan to develop Mangere in a way that will change it hugely, but keep its character and its, essence in place. So this is a public housing development on the corner of Bader and Mackenzie,
that it was the first cab off the rank in Mangere, and I guess we're particularly fond of it because it creates a place for people, and that's the urban design team had a really strong role in helping create this place. I won't read out all that text verbatim, but and I probably don't need to teach you Urban Design 101, but the third paragraph, which is urban design's the combination of the physical, the social, the environmental, and economics to foster community well-being, so people can live well in our communities. People are living here, they love this place. It's got a small playground and a community room, and the reports back from our tenants are they really enjoy living there. If I could go to the next slide, I'll show you some recent developments that we've been involved in. So this is Galway Street in Onehunga, there's 71 homes. It's a mixture of 1 beds and 2 beds, possibly, I can't recall, there might be some 3 beds on that corner to the front of the building. It's in the heart of Onehunga. You can see it's just kind of sort of stepped down from the CBD there. And so, you know, fantastic amenity and adjacency to all sorts of shops and services. That was completed last year and is now tenanted. Next slide. This is Banff Avenue in Epsom, 25 homes. It's 5 stories, lifted apartments as were the last ones. It has a communal space out the back, and you know, sits really well in the street environment. Off to the left of the top slide is I've forgotten the local shopping centre. So it's just immediately adjacent to the local shopping centre. I've forgotten what it's called. A minute. Next slide. Another one in Onehunga, Brookfield Avenue on the corner. This is a 3-story walk-up, which is a typology that we use a lot. It's not lifted, and therefore is a little cheaper to build. 16 homes. You can see that it sits really nicely in the streetscape. It holds the corner. Although the houses nearby are single story, it doesn't look completely out of place in this neighbourhood. And we think it's very successful. So that was completed late last year. Next slide. And this is a very exciting piece of work, which is in the middle of Avondale. We call it Highbury Triangle. I don't know if you know Avondale. It's there's this triangle between Great North Road, Ash Street, and another road. Anyway, I can't remember. Sorry, but it's 6 and 7 story development with 5 apartment buildings, and it will target older adults. It has large communal space which occupies the entire ground floor of one of the buildings, and each of the buildings has a lounge at a sunny end that that facilitates buildings to have kind of a community within them. It's designed. It hasn't got much parking, and it will have some sort of shared vehicle services yet to be determined, and it will have a number of staff helping to operate it. It's also mixed use. One of the apartment buildings will be rented to the market. Next slide. So this brings us to Vinery Lane Car Park, and this is the sort of site we love. It's at the CBD fringe, as you know. It's on a bus, close to a bus route, on a cycle route. It's got fantastic neighbourhood amenity. including all of those schools, the library, close to Pack and Save and New World and Countdown. You could walk there. It's within a 800-metre ped shed if you needed to get your groceries. So we love this site. It's exactly what the sort of site we like to work on. Next slide. And that's an aerial of it, showing the amenity. And zooming in to the next slide. So existing condition is there's 99 car parks and 12 of them are under Croft, under the neighbouring building. There's a narrow footpath on Mansfield Terrace and there's a railway crossing at the end of Vinery Lane. One of the issues is there is no footpath on Vinery Lane. Okay, so next slide. This just shows the slope that goes into it's somewhat depressed from the surrounding streets. And next slide shows the entry points, which are pretty much fixed, we believe. So it's got great opportunities. It's a perfect site for apartments, in our opinion. You know, we're really keen to work with you guys on how to develop it. And the last slide just is some images of the site, which explains those conditions that we talked about. Yeah, so we've got, I suppose, to conclude, we've got a team of people, quite a large team in the development, urban design, planning space, connecting with our regional directors. And we've got a lot of experience now in developing apartment housing for public housing. We're really keen to work with you guys to further that, particularly in this site. So I'll hand back to Jeff, I think.
Thank you, Sue. As I said at the outset, what we're looking for at this point is the opportunity to work with you to explore options through the design process, and through that process to better understand the opportunities as you see them, but also the issues and concerns that you have. And I know some of those are about how to manage car parking, the existing car parking, and whether it could potentially be retained or transferred, or there could be some some midpoint. And my view is that the only way to really come to grips with that is through digging into it through the design and options process. And we would really like the opportunity to do that with you. So I think, Madam Mayor, it'd be good to open up to questions if there are any at this time.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Sue and Benjamin. Councillors, I mean, I could start the ball rolling, but because I don't yet see any hands up. I will start the ball rolling. So, Jeff, I completely can see why Vinery Lane is an attractive proposal for you, and I totally understand why you're focusing in on that. I guess I'll run through the issues that I would like to just explore, and then I see other hands are coming up, so that's good. So one is around the ownership model. I mean, we currently own that piece of land, and I would just I'm just querying your preferred option. Is it to purchase the land? Is lease an option? You mentioned the car parks, and I noticed in one of the slides it was, perhaps the funds from the sale of the land council could invest into parking elsewhere. I guess part of what I'm thinking is that people have been using that site for a car park for quite some time. It's also linked to a resource consent for our library. There's some sort of complicating aspects there. So if you could cover that off. The other query I have is the 1 and 2 bedroom model. You talk quite a lot about families with children and the proximity to schools. I get that and I agree. I just wonder whether, and perhaps this is something for Sue, whether a larger number of bedrooms would be an option that you could look at. You sort of 3, 2 and 1 bedroom, a mixed model, just to get that range of options. I also would love to know if you're relocating tenants, because you're talking about selecting tenants for the apartments. If you were selecting people who are currently in, say, a 3-bedroom accommodation, but they're only a household of 2, does that free up that level of accommodation to other potential tenants? Is that one of the strategies? And my other query was, you talked about the number of sites that you had investigated, Dent Street being one of them, and I think you've rightly sort of let that go at this point because we haven't made our final decisions, but I'm interested, as other councillors, I think, in where those other places were and whether or not you are still looking at those for options. Sorry to make sort of 3 points, but I might as well while I've got the floor. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. So in terms of the ownership model, we could purchase it outright or we could lease. Both of those models work for us. If we purchased the site, it would give you money to transfer elsewhere in terms of potentially putting up a car parking building. And I note that the Hunter Vice are coming to open soon, and it's a fantastic building, and perhaps supplying car parking in a car parking building near there would be a good use of money. But that's something that we could work through in the design process, because it's not necessarily the case that we'd need to take all of the sites. It would be easier for us if it was just our people there. The other thing is that Mansfield Terrace has traffic in each direction. It's a 2-lane little road. Potentially it could go down to one direction, and the other lane could be given over to car parking, which might pick up 30 to 40 sites, depending on landscaping and that sort of thing. The bedrooms, 1 or 2 bedrooms, or potentially 3, again, we'd like to explore that with you. The advice I've been given from talking to regional directors in Auckland who have a lot of apartments is that the 2-bedroom model is working better. And I think there's a couple of things there. One is that if we do have older people living there, it enables them to age in place by having a caregiver, perhaps a family member, living with them. But also the 2-bedroom model allows for small families, and that would take good advantage of the schools, which is quite a unique opportunity at Vinery Lane, because they could go from primary right through to high school and then on into tertiary, all within walking distance. So perhaps that's the model there. And 3-bedroom, again, we could certainly explore that because the site's quite a big site. In terms of freeing up other homes, yes, we do have people living in 3 or 4 bedroom homes in the suburbs, and their children have left home, and they could move down to a smaller place, and this would provide that opportunity for that to happen. In terms of other sites, well, we're looking at a lot of different places. We have looked at the city centre down there on the lower ground, and that could work. I'm a little bit cautious about the issues around the fill and the cost of building, but presumably that'd be reflected in the price of the land. we are also really interested in other opportunities up on that ridge where this site is and running further in towards Kensington, which has been upzoned. We own land, for example, in the avenues. We already have homes there, and eventually we'll redevelop those homes. And as we do that, we'll try to take advantage of the upzoning that the council's provided in its district plan, and potentially go to, perhaps 3-story walk-ups or higher potentially. Yeah, we're also looking in discussions with private sector landowners to get other opportunities. But we also can make good use of the land we own in Otatangarei and Raumanga. And of course, if the North Tech were to move, then we would aim to, we will enter into discussion with them to try and be part of whatever the future is for that side. But also, I think one of your councillors asked, where potentially council's role is as a partner, and I feel as though council's already playing a fantastic role as a partner. Your growth strategy enables this sort of growth and anticipates this sort of proposal, as does your district plan, the appeals version. You put a lot of effort and money into infrastructure, the wastewater, and just enabling that growth. So I feel as though a lot of what you're already doing is your core role, and the Vinery Road site provides a unique opportunity to take that a step further into an actual project. Thank you.
Cheers, Jeff. I've got Vince and Gavin and Carol.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Jeff and Sue. Look, since the last presentation, I've gone out to a lot of the real estate agents that I know and had a chat to them about whangarei and how they see certain things. So they've posed me a few questions, which I'm going to pose to you to see if you can answer them for me. Some of the real estate agents have really questioned Kia Ora's ability to look after apartments when they have a lot of their clients complaining about the next door neighbour, which Kia Ora presently own. So that's one of the questions. Where is the evidence and proof that Kia Ora is actually able to look after and put the right type of people, or even the appropriate people, into apartments in this type of location? The next question is more relating to the real estate agents are asking about. They're presently putting in apartments or selling apartments within whangarei, 2-bedroom apartments between $1.3 and $1.5 million. How is this development going to actually affect those sales when they're actually in a very similar proximity? When a lot of the real estate agents are trying to get commercial executive people to be in those types of areas. And the last one is more probably relying to you, Sue, because you're the urban design person. When young families are growing up, they're needing open spaces and green yards and be able to grow vegetables and things like that. How is this, putting them in apartments, actually going to help that in that urban design approach, especially with this one, since it is basically a concrete jungle and there is no areas to grow vegetables, grow out in the garden, do that sort of, and you have a school across the road, across the railway line. It's just a concrete jungle in that space.
All right, thank you. So with regard to your first question, Kāinga Ora's ability to look after its property and the behaviour of our tenants, with regard to the property, I think things have really changed in the last few years for Kāinga Ora. We've come out of a long period where we've had relatively little money, and that's under the Housing New Zealand model, into a period where both the National Party and Labour Party acknowledge that a lot more needs to be done to provide and maintain public housing. And that has resulted in a great deal more money coming into the Kāinga Ora environment. And so we're able to begin doing a lot more maintenance and also renovations. So I think if you look back over the last 10 years and you look around at some of our housing, you'll see that the maintenance hasn't always been that great. But from this point and looking forward, things have shifted simply because the budget environment has shifted and we're able to put a lot more into our houses. And alongside that, the legislative environment has shifted. So warm and dry and safe houses are a requirement, and we're investing to do that. We are preparing a list of up to 400 homes across Northland that we're going to prioritise for significant renovation, so significant reinvestment, and then we'll just keep moving our way through that process. And actually, one of the things that means is a lot of work for local tradespeople, and also a lot of investment in apprenticeships, because we need to build more, a bigger work pool, a staff pool to work in that environment. So there's those flow-on ancillary benefits. And in terms of people, well, as I said, we have 1,370 homes in the Whangarei district, and we have 65 of those homes on our list in terms of people who are not necessarily living very well and getting on with their neighbours. Some of those people and some of those homes make the news and they become, the story. But they're a tiny portion of the total. So I would, I'm very clear in my own mind, and I think the numbers back it up very clearly, that our people live just like everybody else. They live well, they go about their lives quietly, except in a few situations. And that's the same for the wider community. In terms of selling people, the impact on the wider real estate market, so if the real estate agents are selling apartments for 1.3 to 1.5 million, would us going in there impact it? I would say it wouldn't, but I could invite Gary look at a comment. My view is that our impact will be small in terms of the overall market. The market's being driven by underlying factors that I don't see us impacting. But Gary, I don't know if you're there and you'd like to comment on that at all. Okay, well, perhaps he's not, but that would be mine. Oh.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff, I didn't realise I was still on mute. Look, the only thing I would say is, of course, our units are not actually for sale, so they don't affect the sales prices of other units. And there's a lot of discussion about whether we detract from our neighbours. And historically down here in Auckland, we've found that we actually haven't at all. Because of the certainty of having a new development alongside you has been better than some of the older pre-existing stock that we've in fact redeveloped.
Would you like me to speak to the last question, which was about families living in apartments? We find we solicit feedback from our tenants after they've been in our houses for 6 months, so that they can get a good sense of how it works for them. And the feedback is, largely positive, obviously not always completely positive, but I would say remarkably positive. People love having a view out of the balcony. They love that they have really warm apartments. Apartments are really warm to live in. Our apartments are really well designed and well made. They're quite spacious. They're slightly more spacious than the lower end of the market, and we provide community rooms. And if it's a certain scale, which this development would trigger, we provide a community room and a communal outdoor space. You saw in the case of Beta Mackenzie, there's a little playground, it's fenced, it's in association with the community room. And our tenants report that they love that. They end up having a Christmas dinner together. They
book it for a birthday party, or they might just have, I don't know, housey one evening. So it's a different way of living, but it's not less than. It has different amenities, not the same amenity. It doesn't have a back garden, but what it has is other amenities. It's close to everything. And having been into some of these apartments, I have to say, having a view is a fantastic thing. Looking out is an amenity in and of itself. Yeah, so I guess that's what I would say. I don't think that we develop concrete jungles.
Thanks, Sue. I've got Gavin, then Carol and Greg Innes.
Okay, Jeff, so you've asked the question if we're prepared to move forward through the design phase and to look at a partnership with you. The answer is yep, let's get into it. Just know, though, once you put your foot in the door, we're going to drag you through, and this is just the start of it. So for me, it's absolutely, let's get into it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Gavin. Carol?
Thank you, and thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you, Gavin, for articulating. I'm interested in time constraints for accessing the money that you have within Kāinga Ora. I'm aware that whangarei has been put up as an area of high need in New Zealand, but I'm just wondering whether there might be a carpe diem part to this, and also interested in any other early wins, because obviously I assume this development will take 2 to 3 years if we manage to get it started.
Jeff, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor. Yes. Well, it would take a number of years if we moved ahead with it until it was open. But that isn't of itself a problem. The government has its public housing plan, which calls on us to deliver a certain number of homes in various time periods. And so this one would probably be delivered outside the current public housing plan and in the next period. So that's not a problem. There's not a time constraint there. And yes, whangarei is a high needs area. And in terms of doing other ones, yes, if there were good land opportunities and it made as much sense as it does on the site, we would look to do others in future. But it needs to fit into the context and the existing community, and I think this particular site is great. And if there were others that were equally good, we would look at potentially doing apartments in the future as well.
Just clarifying what you said, you do believe that there is financial capacity for whangarei to do more in this area?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, essentially we're given a task to build a certain number of houses, and we're funded to do that. And we could do those as single house, standalone houses, or we could do them as apartments. There's a variety of mixes. But what we're hoping to do with you here is look at options, and the options would have to work for you, but they'd have to work for us as well. And Gary, you might want to add to that.
I think I just reinforced, Jeff, that we would very much be open to other quick wins, whether it's on council land or other land that council's aware of that we could make use of. This site we picked for a reason, because it's and as Jeff says, I think, though, to be fair, Jeff, we could probably deliver this by the June 2024, which is one of our public housing dates. If you work backwards, we should, if not totally finished, it would be very well into construction by then.
I've got Greg Innes, then Tricia, then Phil.
Thank you, Cheryl. My feeling is that we definitely need to take the next step. and that is looking at options. I'm interested in your what you call your working design group and your experience elsewhere. Has that involved councillors or the governance component as part of that working group?
Gary, I'll pass that one to you.
Yeah, sure. Look, we're open to ideas. You know, and there was a comment before about a smaller group of councillors. We're more than happy to have councillors involved, or whether you just delegate that to your staff. Yeah, either way, really. I mean, that's one of the things we're here to discuss today, I suppose, or the next steps. Yeah,
so I see hopefully out of this we can actually move forward, and part of it I feel is having a governance component in that at some stage in that process. The other thing is I'd raise in other sites, I always look towards North Tech, and it requires facilitation to enable that to come about. So I just put that in the ring for consideration at some stage in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Tricia, then Phil, then Simon.
Thank you. I know you're not sure about the size of the units yet, and I'm really interested that you could have single parent families with only 2 bedrooms, which to me implies there's probably only going to be 1 child, and I would have thought that most single parents would have more than 1. But anyway, approximately what sort of number of units are you thinking of on that site, given that I know there's some movement around that? I'm supportive of going forward. I'm a little concerned that it's in a bowl and it's sort of on the edge of the CBD. So I am a bit slightly concerned that it could end up being just a little separate. But equally, I see the pros are the closeness to schools and closeness to the CBD. So I'm on balance okay about it, but I'm certainly prepared to move forward, and I think sale is probably the way to go rather than a lease. But yeah, I am interested in the number issue, and also the issue you mentioned in terms of older people. Are they people who would be coming from larger homes who would then be freeing up other housing or kāinga ora properties? So yeah, it's really the size of the units and where the people are coming from I'm interested in. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think in terms of whether it's 1 or 2 bedrooms, that's something that we would work through in the design process, and I think that's probably the best way to do that.
Or 3 bedrooms.
Or 3 bedrooms, yeah, sure, or 3, that's a good point. And also the total number of units, again, I think the design process should tip that out rather than us saying now that it would be X number or Y number, because I think we really need to look into, do a design that is a quality design rather than necessarily a small one or a big one. And yeah, we could bring the tenants, the older tenants might be people whose family have grown up and left, or they might be people who are new to us, who haven't had a history of being in kāinga ora homes. And I think one of the things that we're probably all aware of is that there are a lot of people ending their working lives without any money, and while they're working they might be able to rent a market house, but when they finish working they're really stuck, and there seems to be quite a large number of those people, and so this is catering for people like that. I heard a presentation last week from the Mayor of Nelson, I think it was the Nelson Council, and one of the things she mentioned is that she's talking to a lot of people, particularly women who are older, whose marriages and relationships have split up, and they're unable to rent anything, and that's partly because the Airbnb are taking houses out of the market and pushing what's left up. So there's a whole cohort of people who are looking to us to house them, who might not have actually been housed by us through their working lives.
If I could just pop in. Oh, sorry, Tricia.
Sorry, could I just on the, I think it's really important then if it is older people, that there is some real interrelationship with our work in terms of senior housing. And I absolutely take your point about the older single woman. I've certainly come across that myself. But yeah, I just think there needs to be an intersection with us around what we are looking to do with our housing for seniors as well, so that we maximise, rather than, not suggesting we'd necessarily duplicate, but we certainly maximise the opportunities. Thank you. Sorry, Sue.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be useful to note that that we try and place people in homes that work for them, and they're under no obligation to accept homes. They have the opportunity to say, no, this won't work for me. I don't want to live in this circumstance. So, and we will find them something else. So that's really good to understand.
Phil, then Simon and Ken. Phil, you're on mute.
Yeah, all sides are good ones if you look from one perspective, but this one I'm very guarded about this because I was a council chairman who actually acquired that site for car parking in the middle of our CBD on the fringe. So as part of our planning was to get car park in that area, and I retained that view because all the neighbouring streets are absolutely chock full now of car parking. So I don't want to see you passing on a problem to us again. So my one is preferred is definitely retain a council car park at the base, and you can have whatever's above that. But yeah, we've got a massive need for car parking in that area, and with the courthouses and all the legal facility around it, that's the very reason why we bought it. And the other couple of points, just for Sue's interest in that, and I've been a trustee on retirement villages since one of them for 28 years, and the other one for probably 12 years. And in that time, I know a bit about dynamics about how people get on and what leads to them not getting on. I think not enough thought's gone up into that, and especially in the CBD area on the fringe. And some of the other councils have mentioned that they need green space, they need a bit of relaxation areas and common areas. And in my previous life, before I got into council role, my first job was a carpenter, so I can visualise how things have to be put together. And I actually got a good perspective of what you're trying to do and how you incorporate it. But I think there's a possibility going ahead as long as we retain our and grow our car park numbers. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Simon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation, guys. Got a few questions and a few comments to make. Now, as Phil said, that car parking site up there is extremely important to the area. It's always busy. Every time I've gone through there, it's always been pretty well filled up, that place. But I just kind of reading between the lines, I get the feeling that you're clutching at straws for sites. And you just seem to keep harking back to that one place. Surely there must be alternatives out there, and is there not government-owned land somewhere else in town that you would be able to move into and act on and get building quicker? That's one. I have a little bit of an issue that this is the second time we've talked about this, and I'm going to be blunt here, and I make no apology for that, because I just like to say what I think. The more we immerse ourselves in this conversation, the less happy I feel about it. It almost comes across to me as if you're issuing an ultimatum. You can go and find car parking somewhere else and you move on. We want this site type thing. And yeah, it rankles me a little, I'll be honest. But putting that aside, I've got first-hand, what would you call it, knowledge and experience of living in a street that has a multi-story block of flats, and the noise and the tenancy and it's not what you really would relish having in your CBD if it was to be moved from where I live to the CBD. So if you were planning on replicating the same sort of thing, I would be very, very averse to it. I do, however, have an option when it comes to a large site handy to town with green space available. There's an old motel, very aging, that sits on both Kauika Road and what is probably State Highway 1, Western Hills Drive, just up from the lights at Manu Road. And to me, that would be a more suitable site. It is a little further from the amenities in town, and it's not straight across the road from Kentucky Fried Chicken or the McDonald's store. So yeah, those are just my things, but you know, alternative sites that are, I know University of Auckland straight across the other side of the railway tracks up there, but there must be other government owned land that you can get to avail yourselves of quicker. Thank you.
Simon, do you own that old motel? Are you prepared to sell it?
If I did, it would have a big apartment block on it, Cheryl.
Thank you, Councillor. So we are looking at alternative sites, and I'm just wondering if you're meaning the Casablanca. Is that the one up against State Highway 1? But we've been talking with a number of motel owners, so we are interested in other sites. In terms of government-owned land that's in the urban centre, I'm not aware of anything that's as good as this, or that it's available. Really, you're looking at education land, and you know, that obviously isn't always available, or as often, or generally isn't available. The hospital hasn't made any suggestions that they have land available. So no, really, it's either the private sector or it's the council who are the key landowners. And we do enter into discussions with private sector landowners, including some on Bank Street and various other places. And we certainly don't want to be seen as issuing any ultimatum. We're hoping to work in partnership with you, and at this stage to just develop options so that we can see what it might look like in you know, if it were to go ahead.
Thanks, Jeff. Ken.
Thank you very much. If I'm understanding the scale of the problem correctly, then what we do on Vinery Lane will only be a small part of the solution. I believe that this is an example for the council to be an enabler to help solve a problem, and that it's clearly within our powers to do so. So I fully support going further. Within that decision and that support, there is the constraints that Cheryl mentioned right at the beginning around the link to the library and the resource consent, and Phil has mentioned with the parking, and obviously those would be things that I guess we would expect to sort of talk to you about as we went through the process to try and find ways that we can make it all work. But fully support you going ahead to the next stage, and also I would like to think that while we do that, other sites are looked at, and I support the formation of a group to help facilitate that and make sure that we as a council, I know Jeff, you outlined our role and you think we're doing well, and that's great to hear. I do think we could probably, without going into the areas of the existing organisations, one of the better things we could do better is work more closely and align ourselves more closely with what we're trying to achieve, what you guys are trying to achieve, so that, because the problem's very clear, and there's no reason why we can't align ourselves more closely and still stick to our role. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. I've got Nicholas.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I've got a bit of concern as well, just with the car parking issue about that space and just trying to filtering people to the other areas. I agree that not everybody needs a car park, not everybody needs those ones, but with the fact that we've already taken away a huge chunk of car parking within the CBD area for the new park that's going to be dead, people will already be moving into other areas that will need to be those use of spaces as well for existing, not new developments, whilst we also will have to think about the consideration of what Hundertwasser will be bringing into the town. We can't say, well, that car park can be for Hundertwasser and that one will be for the working people, because that's one of the spaces that we have. I do see this space as an opportunity, though. I don't see why we can't go into this direction. I see it as an option that we're looking at rather than being stuck with only this option. It's just you have to present on one particular option to get a conversation going. Also thinking about the spaces people require and need, whilst I have different uses, each one of you have different spaces that would be useful for you. And I've spoken to people that have required much less than even I have as well. And I've got quite a small property with the outskirts. So even regarding the space that people might need, having a common space, but also having the ability to create common spaces around the area will definitely add to those types of abilities, but also having a smaller option of those spaces. I mean, my father's lived in an apartment for quite some time, and I've lived with him there as well, and they've had fantastic gardens on their decks outside and whatnot, and the ability to be able to create a welcoming, warm space, even in a small area, it can work for those people who have the ingenuity to be able to do so, but there are options out there to be able to create those things as well. Being able to support people in those options. I mean, as sorry, I can't remember what was, I think it was Sue, said about giving the opportunity for people saying, would you want this space? Would this work for you to be able to come in? And I mean, people being able to say, no, that wouldn't be suitable for me. To other people that do just want to be able to walk around town. I mean, you already see it these days. You see people walking in close proximity to these areas. And whilst we hear a lot of the conversations about people that have the means and technology to be able to communicate, there are those people that don't have the means and the means to communicate, but you do see them out and about and doing what they can to get around. And if we can make it easier for people to get around town as well, having a close proximity to the shops, to usable spaces, then we already have that ability to provide what they need when they don't already have it, when we have to put them into fit them into the block that we already have, the cut paste type of thing of you have to fit into this lifestyle when they want a different lifestyle. And if we don't provide that for them, then they just get stuck with what we have. There are concerns, but I see this as a positive.
Thank you, Nicholas. Shelley.
Thank you for the presentation. I do support a working group of councillors continuing to look further into this. Obviously, there are a number of benefits, but there are also a number of constraints that need to be considered. In particular, the car park would need to be retained in the base of the apartment block, I believe, if there was one built there. I still have concerns over the use of the word partnership. Partnership to me means 50% in everything, and I certainly wouldn't go there. Particularly, I have concerns, we're talking about affordable accommodation for senior citizens amongst other affordable accommodation, and Kāinga Ora have already had the opportunity to partner with council in providing further accommodation in 2 voluntarily run retirement complexes in our district, which are all set up and ready to go with extra accommodation, and that has been turned down. So that just concerns me a little in the partnership arrangement. Proximity to the railway line is interesting, with presumably families living in the apartment block. I see a number of constraints which other people have already recognised, but I do think that there's enough opportunity there to warrant council looking further into the pros and cons of going ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. Jane, I'm aware that you're on the line, but we can't see you. Do you have any comments? Okay, she's either on mute or no longer with us. I think on balance, the feedback has been generally to proceed to next steps with this site. You've heard some of the opportunities and constraints that have been raised. I also note that there's been a number of people who have talked about a smaller group. We did have our inner city spearhead group, and I'm conscious of the fact that there are already people who are living adjacent to that. I think Peter Gregory and his wife have been doing some development on that adjacent site. So we need to be incorporating them into any future discussions for that site, because they've invested quite a lot into living there. So it definitely does meet the criteria for a good place to live. Ramari, I think I'll hand back to you just for a wrap up, but I think it would be fair to say that we would be keen to continue this, as Nicholas calls it, the conversation.
Kia ora everyone, thank you very much for your feedback, and thank you, Jeff, for your presentation, along with Sue and Benjamin and Gary. Take on board your feedback and hear the constraints and issues that have been laid out as well, and we'll proceed to collaborate, I think will be the word going forward, and with Jeff and his team, and come back to you at a later date with the design options. Thank you, and thank you to Jeff and his team.
Yes, I endorse that. That thanks to the team. Thanks for your work that you've done already into just preparing for this. Keen to proceed, and it's a shame in a way that we have to mention 2024 as a date to be looking at for adding to the housing stock in Whangarei. Let's hope we can work on initiatives before that as well. So team, we've been sitting for quite some time. I encourage you to stand up, do some calisthenics, run around the block, go up the shared path, whatever. Shelley, you're probably going out to visit, feed some calves. Thanks everybody, and thanks for all of our support crew who have been on the call as well, ensuring that we have made this go smoothly. I shall bid you all farewell. Ka kite anō.
Ka kite, thank you very much.